Hello friends and fellow world builders, my name is AJ Winters and welcome back to World Builder. Today we're talking regions and geographical influences. Now last week we did some map making with some very interesting techniques, and after the voting went down over the last couple of days and including our patrons double vote, you guys have chosen map number 2. So I am very intrigued to dig in today with some regions, mountains and rivers, and maybe some capital cities. What sparked last week's episode was the Tri-Lands and the Fire Islands. So we're going to start with those two. Seeing as you guys seem really keen for them, I want to give a little context of the Tri-Lands because I think I talked briefly about them in episode 1, but let's dive a little further into that concept. For me, the Tri-Lands were 3 separate cities that offered different resources. One city might have mining and gems, while another city would be close to the rivers and fishing, and the third city would be farmlands and agriculture. But how do we translate that to this map? And where do we put the Tri-Lands? I think they have to be quite central. Just blindly choose where they go. Okay, I've noticed in literature and in our own world, mountain ranges definitely divide up regions and borders because it stops language exchange and cultural exchange between cities and civilizations. So let's start with something like that. I think that we should just put in a giant mountain range down the center of this continent. Maybe we'll chuck in a few on this side as well. Now we need the location of our Tri-Lands. So let's start with our water city. I've been looking at some influences for cities that have rivers going through them, like Venice or something similar. And don't judge me, but I went straight back to Dinotopia. There's a city in Dinotopia called Waterfall City where thousands, that's probably an exaggeration, where so many rivers join together and sort of cascade over the city.
Welcome to Waterfall City.
I loved that idea so much because not only would there be a fresh water source and access to fish, but you could also have things like water wheels that would collect power or drainage. So there might be some creative things that we can dive into with a city full of rivers. So with Dinotopia, what I'm looking at is a bunch of different rivers that pool into each other into a large chasm. You can actually look up a lot about Dinotopia, including the Venice-like rivers that weave between it, all of the architectural buildings, and the way that the city functions with the wet and dry seasons. There's even a total volume of water that passes down the falls during their peak runoff season, and it's about 4 times as much as Niagara Falls. Which surprisingly I found was similar to the city of Theed on Naboo in Star Wars, as well as the classic Disney favorite, the Lost City of Atlantis. So with all that Dinotopian research behind us, let's go ahead and place our city on the map. I'm gonna roughly put the City of Rivers over here so that the rivers can flow down and meet up with the ocean and these islands over here. And that would also make sense geographically because water, specifically fresh water, would pool down from mountains. Whether it's snowy mountaintops melting, rainfall, or natural water springs, they would eventually cascade down through tributaries and join up to a bigger river that would eventually meet the ocean. So these mountains right here might have snow tops that melt during the hot seasons and flow down into rivers. And those rivers need to find their way back to the ocean, which would be where this city is. Let's go one like that. We want a second one to join from there, and maybe a third one that comes through the continent. So from this little valley, we'll have a third river join up. So we've got one of the Tri-Lands over here. Now we need 2 more cities, and I like the idea of having the Tri-Lands be a triangle, because if we're going to go with the circular cities for runes and teleportation circles, it might be a good idea that the Tri-Lands can also have some sort of magical system between the 3 of them. And in that case, we need some sort of geometric shape to add to the runes and the magic. Okay, I've pinpointed where I think these 3 cities shall be, which I'm really happy with because now we have the Tri-Lands formed and it's already starting to bring this continent together. With this city right here, having it backed by the mountains behind it means that they have safety. They've also chosen to be close to this main river here next to it, which would be their fresh water source. So I think I'm going to add some forestry to the side here, because if this is our agricultural city, we want them to have access to everything, including things like wood for resources and building, animals to hunt, and farmlands. Ooh, we could also use the system of the Nile. The Egyptians used to grow their crops after the flooding season, where the soil along the banks of the River Nile was the best for growing grain. So if we make this river flood at a certain time of year, due to the rainfall in the mountains, for example, then they could use that as their farming system for smaller vegetables and plants in this sort of agricultural zone. Ooh, I like that. Little happy dance. Also, the possibility of having a giant forest nearby means more safety, depending on the ridges, and I think maybe it slopes down into a valley type situation, and that could be possible due to animals trampling the lands to be more flat, or also something that happens often in geography is the rainfall of a mountain will fall a particular way. So sometimes on one side of the mountain it's more green and the other side it's more hot and dry. So we might add that here by having some sort of hot desert lands to the side here. Also, if you guys have any ideas of animals that you want to see in these forests or ideas that you'd like me to try, comment down below in the comment section and I will definitely pay attention to them, because this is a journey that we're all taking together. How far do I want the forests to come up? Maybe not too far. Now, something that I've noticed in my own country of Australia is that cold winds coming from below can also affect the landmass. For example, a lot of people think that it's cold at the top of the continent and hot at the bottom, and that can be true, but it depends what area you're in. In Australia, for example, some colder regions are actually at the bottom of Australia because of the winds that are coming up from Antarctica. So that means, especially in WA, we have a lot of vineyards and cooler regions at the bottom of our country. Beautiful to visit, but also really cool to add into this world. So I'm thinking maybe we have sort of some snowy mountains down here and a wine region, because we need merchants and we need a whole civilization that runs off trade and import. And I need wine in my world. We've already sort of divided up this area. Maybe we have these mountains come a little bit further down. We're looking at having some rough desert lands here. So another thing that I have been discussing with one of my patrons is the Fire Islands. He really loves the idea of the name, and so he was excited to see where I take it and why they were so fascinating to me. Going by the name, I had the idea that it's because of a certain spice that grows only on these islands, basically making them an economic powerhouse because they trade to the rest of the continent. And because it's a spice, you know that that might influence the name. Actually, that would also make them probably a very valuable island, and I'm gonna say there's probably something in there about people coming and taking over the island. I do feel bad talking about colonization, but it is a fictional world and we are going to explore some different themes in here that will lead to an interesting story. So I'm thinking potentially people took over the Fire Islands, burnt it all down, and when they did, this particular spice lit up like a bonfire. Maybe there were giant green flames that you could see from the mainland, and that's the reason that the islands are called the Fire Islands. And now, time jump a little bit forward, the spice is being grown more frequently on the islands, it's the only place that can, And because of all the deforestation from the green fires, it's more luscious, the weather is perfect for it, so the Fire Islands have become an incredibly popular place to A, visit, and B, trade with. I love creating new worlds. These here are going to be the Fire Islands. They need to be close enough to the shore that the green fires would have been seen from the mainland. So one thing I would say, as I wield my pencil like a wand, is the Tri-lands, being that they're going to be the capital cities of this continent, they would definitely have direct access to the Fire Islands. Being that we've now made the Fire Islands such a popular place, including the trading of this spice, whatever it may be, we need direct access to the Fire Islands from the Tri-lands. And because the Tri-lands are being protected by this mountain range here, they would need direct access through the mountain range to a trading port or ship dockyard that would lead them straight to the Fire Islands. And if this is a deserty area, we want the port to be a little higher. So we'll need a city here that will have a direct sail route to the Fire Islands, because we don't want to cross this hot deserty area. And potentially we have some threats in that hot deserty area too, but we'll get to that. What else do we do? Ooh, I actually have a really good idea. Using Australia again as an example, Queensland is a highly tropical and humid area. Basically rainforests, and they have a monsoon season as well as their very dry and humid one. So maybe this area right here would be tropical. Now, I'm no geographical expert, and I definitely don't claim to be, but I don't think you can go from hot tropical humid weather straight into sort of cold, icy Antarctic. I don't think that works, right? Right? Then again, this is a fantasy world. So I do want a cold region. I know we've got the snowy mountains down here, but I definitely want something a little bit colder. So I'm going to divide up this continent. Let's carve out an arc there, and this will be our cold region. I've added in a few more mountains to add to this sort of divide between the different regions in this continent. And I think we're going to dive into those regions a little bit further, which is why I've brought up this map again as an example. As you can see, I've divided up this continent into different regions based on the different areas. So we've got Crestville, Istral, Arcavia, Mykonos, and then I've added in these dotted lines to divide up the regions so you can see where they are and maybe how they connect to each other. I would say that logically, whatever civilization lives up here, they would take this mountain as sort of the border of their world and potentially this lake. So I think with this humid tropic land, we're going to do something similar. They're going to use these mountains as their border, and I think that potentially this mountain city that we have in the Tri-lands is also a defense city. Potentially there's some sort of old history of the wars. Then I think we should have a bigger territory land with the desert included before we block off this bottom mountain one. We're off to a really good start so far. We've got 6 regions, the Fire Islands, and these islands down here which we haven't even tapped into yet. I'm saving them for a special moment. So if you have any suggestions for regional names or city names, put them in the comments below, because I want you guys to have a direct contribution to this world. And I think once we have some of those names ready to go, we can finish this map and dive into the animals, the flora, the traveling, the clothing in the capital cities. We've got so much more to go with this, and I'm just so excited. Now that we have these regions mapped out, we're going to dive a little further into one of the capital cities, specifically the river city of the Tri-lands. I'm really excited to see how this river city works and why it is the way that it is. And I think that's going to shape some of the culture of the Tri-lands moving forward. As always, follow all the socials, hit subscribe, and if you're interested in having some special voting powers as well as seeing some behind the scenes content, then join our Patreon. The links will all be down below. So get in those comments, and I'll see you next week.